on the meaning of life. Whoever you are, wherever and however you are, there are veins, great veins, mother loads of meaning to be found, to be mined, inside and around you, to make your life all the richer, all the finer, all the more treasured and immeasurable. So become a good seeker, miner of real meaning, a panner, and separator of the truly meaningful from the dross, the immaterial. And once found, be a good embracer, deepener, and appreciator of it. You'll know you've struck gold when you feel it in your bones, when you feel it in your heart, when it passes the acid test of what your whole being so naturally knows, serves, and nourishes. The fleeting days, the irreplaceable years and moments you're awake and alive here. Welcome, and thank you for leaning in to this latest floating poetry broadcast, the 47th in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live by the soul-filling sea from Watch Hill, Rhode Island. This is your multiversed poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. Inviting you this week to explore the meaning of life, contemplate the meaning of your life, your days and precious moments here on earth, from the deeper dimensions of your inner world to the vitalizing dimensions of your outer one. I brought together varied weaves of query, cultural commentary, thought, and poetry in this part one, with an eye to illuminating, inspiring, intriguing, and affirming you. I began my own Holy Grail-like quest for a penultimate meaning long ago, and I thought I'd share that with you as we come into our program. And decades into my search, I discovered the answer. It came to me late one night in the middle of a countryside. I was astounded. I immediately rang up my artistic mentor of 40-plus years out in Seattle, Richard Kehl, K-E-H-L, a mercurial man, a maestro, who I had to tell what I had found. He answered, and I said, Eureka, I found the meaning of life. I said, I know you knew what it was all along, but you weren't going to tell me that I'd need to find out what it was on my own. He said, yes. So what is it? I said, all right, hold on. It's that life has no meaning except the meaning we give it. And he laughed and said, that's it. And I laughed. It's far simpler than I ever imagined or could have guessed. And realized, especially as a poet, I had been doing it, had been in the flow of the answer all along. So instead of any absolute, dear listeners, any one big reveal, if that's what you were thinking we were going to have tonight or any night, as I used to think there was or might be myself, instead of life giving some ultimate shining meaning, it's all about what we give to it as we live our life, each to his or her own, and to whatever magnitude or minitude, and however it changes over time, sometimes increasing, sometimes receding, sometimes disappearing altogether, always subjectively, sometimes consciously, sometimes mysteriously. So pause when you can, beyond now, to contemplate what and where you're giving meaning to or more meaning to in your life, in whole or part, how you're infusing meaning in your own one-of-a-kind way with your essence and your energies of being across the spectrum of your living and loving and thinking, your past, your present, and not least, your becoming. Now, on we go, feeling in together. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and philosopher, said ultimately man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. Viktor Frankl. Positive psychology pulled this up as we're going through our discoveries, and they said this on their site. Throughout modern history, one of the questions that humans have asked the most is, quote, what is the meaning of life? We are all hungry for meaning, for purpose, for the feeling that our life is worth more than the sum of its parts. Luckily, humans are resourceful. We have infinite ways of finding meaning and infinite potential sources of meaning. We can find meaning in every scenario, every event, every occurrence, every context. We can find meaning in the sublime, in the absurd, in the dull and dreary, and in the perfectly wretched in life. We intuitively know that we want meaning in our lives, and that meaning helps us thrive, but we rarely stop to ask, why do we need meaning? How does meaning affect us? What even is meaning? So as I've done in other themes, I sometimes pull up and say, well, I'm curious what Wikipedia has to say about some things. So looked at that, and they're right up on this, on the answer to the question of what's the meaning of or purpose of life. Here's some answers from them. I won't read them all, there are quite a few. To realize one's potential and ideals, to live one's dreams, to matter, to count, to stand for something, to have made some difference that you lived at all, to expand one's potential in life, to become the best version of yourself, to be able to put the whole of oneself into one's feelings, one's work, one's beliefs, to achieve eudaimonia, was a Greek idea of flourishing of human spirit. It's quite beautiful. To seek wisdom and knowledge, to find the meaning or purpose of life, to leave the world as a better place than you found it, to be generous, to take every chance to help another while on your journey here, to be creative, to be honorable, to seek peace. And they go through all the different, from Epicureanism and so on, and Aristotelian thoughts, and I was sort of drawn, if I had to be drawn to one, more to the Stoics approach. I wouldn't say I'm a full-blown Stoic, but Zeno of Citium, people of Crates of Thebes, established the school which teaches that living according to reason and virtue is to be in harmony with the universe's divine order, small d. Its prime directives are virtue, reason, and natural law. The Stoic ethical foundation is that, quote, good lies in the state of the soul. Well, for your poet, the soul is what it's all about. The greatest meaningfulness lies in soulfulness. So I thought as we're, me and you, are musing on these things before and right now, the other side of things, the contrary of a meaningful life, a sort of meaningless or purposeless or feeling that it doesn't have it. And I called up something from Lifehack. A life without purpose has no meaning. Have you ever dreaded living a lifeless life? If not, you probably don't know how excruciating such an existence is. Imagine not wanting to wake up every morning, but also not wanting to go to sleep at night. No will to work, no excitement to spend, no friends' company to enjoy, and no reason to continue living. A blank mind with nothing to think about, the lack of emotions, negative and positive, nothing to look forward to. And listeners, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there through time and now that are in that state of being and maybe have been thrown into it by what's happening in the world. So I think some compassion for them is a very good thing, or in some sense that they're out there. You're full of anxiety. Do you find yourself stuck in a cycle of an anxious life? Probably because lack of purpose. Motivation is a long-lost dream. Lack of focus keeps you from growing. Every field, career, part of life, and relationship requires growth. Success seems unachievable. It affects your physical health. Nothing in life is enjoyable. So there's many downsides to not having meaning or enough meaning in our lives. The British writer Olivia Laing, on our social media and aspects of its meaninglessness, said this: online engagement seems to exercise its special charm hidden behind a computer screen. A lonely person has control. They can search for company without the danger of being revealed or found wanting. They can reach out or they can hide. They can lurk and they can show themselves safe from the humiliation of face-to-face rejection. The screen acts as a kind of protective membrane, a scrim that permits invisibility and also transformation. You can filter your image, concealing unattractive elements, and you can emerge enhanced, an online avatar designed to attract likes. But now a problem arises, for the contact this produces is not quite the same thing as intimacy. Curating a perfected self might win followers on Facebook or Facebook friends, but it will not necessarily cure loneliness, since the cure for that is not being looked at, but being seen and accepted as a whole person, ugly, unhappy, and awkward, as well as radiant and selfie-ready. Olivia Laing. The performer Amanda Palmer said, we think that we're all very connected, we think we're all very communicative, but when you actually strip it down, there's a lot wrong, and the proof is in the pudding. You have a whole society of people who are depressed and insecure and anxious and paranoid and worried and fundamentally feeling very unseen. Maybe we've constructed culture in a way that people are not feeling recognized, loved, accepted, happy with their place in society. What have we done to create such unhappiness? Good question. Question worth asking. In a larger way. Well, on not living meaningfully, there's so many consequences to not filling our lives with meaning. And here's a poem that I composed back in some winters ago. Going Hungry, it's called. What happens when you don't feed your heart, your soul, the deep nourishment it needs, it deserves? The daily regimen, bread and wine of joy, of deep loving, being deeply loved, as essential as the air you breathe, to sustain the whole of living. Going hungry, going without this way, without this bounty of milk and honey for your spirit body, flesh and blood body, is no way for anyone to be or choose. No way for you to thrive or stay vitally alive, especially when it's all there for the inviting, the allowing, and partaking. The great German poet Rainer Maria Rilke had this to say to the young poet, famous letters to a young poet that he wrote back in 1903. I want to beg you, he said, as much as I can, to be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, to try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given to you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Rebecca Solnit, from her book, A Field Guide to Getting Lost. I think about self-discovery and transformation that's available to us. She said, leave the door open for the unknown, the door into the dark. That's where the most important things come from, where you yourself came from, and where you will go. 3 years ago, I was giving a workshop in the Rockies. A student came in bearing a quote from what she said was the pre-Socratic philosopher Meno. It read, how will you go about finding the thing, the nature of which is totally unknown to you? I copied it down. And It has stayed with me since. The student made big transparent photographs of swimmers underwater and hung them from the ceiling with the light shining through them, so that to walk among them was to have the shadows of swimmers travel across your body in a space that itself came to seem aquatic and mysterious. The question she carried struck me as the basic, tactical question in life. The things we want are transformative, and we don't know or only think we know what is on the other side of that transformation. Love, wisdom, grace, inspiration. How do you go about finding these things that are in some ways about extending the boundaries of the self into unknown territory, about becoming something else? Thank you, Rebecca Solnit. Which brought me to E.F. Schumacher, the British economic theorist and philosopher, and his famous Guide for the Perplexed. And in that, he talks about the art of adequatio and seeing with the eye of the heart. What enables man to know anything at all about the world around him? Nothing can be known without there being an appropriate, quote, instrument in the makeup of the knower. This is the great truth of adequatio, adequateness, which defines knowledge as adequatio re et intellectus. The understanding of the knower must be adequate to the things to be known. Only through the heart can contact be made with the highest grades of significance and levels of being. For anyone wedded to the materialistic scientism of the modern age, higher levels of reality simply do not exist, because their faith excludes the possibility of their existence. They're like a man who, although in possession of a radio receiver, refuses to use it because he has made up his mind that nothing can be obtained from it but atmospheric noises. The great Hermann Hesse on destiny, on becoming. When destiny comes to a man from outside, it lays him low, just as an arrow lays a deer low. When destiny comes to a man from within, from his innermost being, it makes him strong. It makes him into a god. A man who has recognized his destiny never tries to change it. The endeavor to change destiny is a childish pursuit that makes men quarrel and kill one another. All sorrow, poison, and death are alien, imposed destiny. But every true act, everything that is good and joyful and fruitful on earth, is lived destiny, destiny that has become self. You were made to be yourselves. You are made to enrich the world with a sound, a tone, a shadow. In each one of you there is a hidden being, still in the deep sleep of childhood. Bring it to life. In each one of you there is a call, a will, an impulse of nature, an impulse toward the future, the new, the higher. Let it mature. Let it resound. Nurture it. Your future is not this or that. It is not money or power. It is not wisdom or success at your trade. Your future, your hard, dangerous path is this: to mature and to find godliness in yourselves. Hermann Hesse. Well, further on becoming, a poem from some springs back of mine. Becoming a butterfly. Brightly colored, abundantly winged, lighter than air. To become one, you must climb out of your chrysalis, out of your carapace, your unmetamorphosed self. Discover, then enter your newer, truer form, and fly off, fly forth, flutter freely into the wider, wilder world. Encouraging us all who aren't fluttering there to become butterflies in that way, metamorphose. Alan Watts, the philosopher, a slice of him: unless one is able to live fully in the present, the future is a hoax. There's no point whatever in making plans for a future which you will never be able to enjoy. When your plans mature, you will still be living for some other future beyond. You will never, never be able to sit back with full contentment and say, now I've arrived. Something in there to ponder. Alain Botton of the School of Life, I spoke of him in another broadcast, and he was distilling Friedrich Nietzsche's convictions, and he said, no one is able to produce a great work of art without experience, nor achieve a worldly position immediately, not be a great lover at the first attempt. In the interval between initial failure and subsequent success, in the gap between who we wish one day to be and who we are at present, must come pain, anxiety, envy, and humiliation. We suffer because we cannot spontaneously master the ingredients of fulfillment. Nietzsche was striving to correct the belief that fulfillment must come easily or not at all, a belief ruinous in its effects, for it leads us to withdraw prematurely from challenges that might have been overcome if only we had been prepared for the savagery legitimately demanded by almost everything valuable. The Irish Nobel laureate poet Seamus Heaney, not around now, although he, of course, lives on in many ways. Poet, playwright, translator, passed away in, I think, 2013. And he celebrated poetry's singular power to us. He said, remind us that we are hunters and gatherers of values, and to, quote, persuade that vulnerable part of our consciousness. And he said, getting started, keeping going, getting started again in art and in life. It seems to me that this is the essential rhythm not only of achievement but of survival, the ground of convinced action, the basis of self-esteem, and the guarantee of credibility in your lives, credibility to yourselves as well as to others. This rhythm is something I would want each one of you to experience in the years ahead, and experience not only in your professional life, whatever that may be, but in your emotional and spiritual lives as well. Because unless that underground level of self is preserved as a verified and verifying element in your makeup, you're going to be in danger of settling into whatever profile the world prepares for you and accepting whatever profile the world provides for you. You'll be in danger of molding yourselves in accordance with laws of growth other than those of your own intuitive being. Well, for some reason, that brought me to mind synchronicity, which some of you maybe know of or know more of and believe in. I certainly do, only because I've experienced it so much and I've become so attuned to it that I can see it happening all the time. And it probably is happening even more, but the more I attune, the more I can see it. So Greg Lavoie, in his book Callings, incredible book. I'm in the midst of it now. I'm almost finished, but I'm going to read it all over again. I just so happened to be reading this the other day and thought, oh, perfect for us. Synchronicities, or as I say, life rhyming. Let's drink this in if we can. Synchronicities can be at one end of the spectrum stupefyingly obvious. Alan Combs, co-author of Synchronicity, the book, relates the story of a friend who was trying to decide which of two women to marry. One of the women was named Julie. He then saw a license plate that read Julie for number for you, letter, Julie for you. A newspaper article I read several years ago told another such story of a woman who was trying to decide whether to stay in her church choir group. While driving home from what she thought might be her last choir meeting, she saw an image of Jesus in a billboard advertisement for spaghetti, which she took as a sign that she was meant to stay in the choir. At the other extreme, synchronicities can be tremendously subtle. You've just made up your mind about a course of action when a small dark cloud, the only one in the sky, momentarily obscures the sun, or a door slams, or someone drops a book. You get just enough of a jiggle to give you pause. Perhaps synchronicities, like dreams and symptoms, are happening all the time, and we simply don't notice them until they reach a certain level of explicitness, which may be different for each of us. Maybe they have to shout and wave flags, splash their perfume around, and put on sequins and dance a hoochie-coochie. In the age of information, a lot competes for our attention. We derive meaning from, quote, just coincidence when an external event matches up with an event on the inside. It doesn't always. You might be sitting in a waiting room, for instance, reading a magazine article about George Gershwin, when the receptionist sticks her head out the door and calls for the next patient, a Mr. Gershwin. And as outlandish as this may seem to you, if it finds no hook on the inside, it's only an amazing coincidence, not a synchronicity. If it means something to you, however, then it's amazing and potentially instructive. So they are instructive, Jung felt, because they seem related to the growth process he called individuation, which is the work of becoming ourselves and making ourselves distinct from our surroundings, from the grabby dictates of the collective and the expectations of others. One way they may do this, he said, is by reflecting or projecting onto events in the outer world something we already know but don't know we know, the authentic self as it's encoded in the soul. It's a coincidence that has an analog in the psyche. So he goes on about that, and he said the primary reality of synchronicities is emotional, not intellectual. The reason they're there is to make us feel something, and the feeling that our lives are rich and worth, our reflection comes in part from our sense of the depth and mystery of life. Perhaps they appear for no other purpose than to jostle our skepticism and open our minds to the existence of the inexplicable and the numinous in our lives, whether we believe in these dimensions or not. Some things can't be grasped with the mind, but can only be cupped as one would cup a palmful of water. Perhaps they help us reflect on the beauty and harmony in life, says the author Milan Kundera, and if we're blind to them, quote from him, we deprive our lives of a dimension of beauty, because synchronicities are composed like music. Maybe the most important thing that they bring to us is astonishment. How often in the course of a day or a week or month do we find ourselves thunderstruck, flabbergasted at life, amazed by its finesse? The synchronicities are like the glimpse of a wild animal seldom seen, the discovery of an arrowhead or a geode, the return of your wallet by some good Samaritan. Far removed from the mundaneness that seems to characterize such a vast portion of daily life, they help reconnect us to our awe. Given the tyranny of the commonplace, what a service. Thank you, Greg Lavoie. So, from there, I was thinking of other qualities of meaning. Calmness, kindness, and some others, joy. Here's a poem by Wallace Stevens. The house was quiet and the world was calm. And the house was quiet and the world was calm. The reader became the book, and summer night was like the conscious being of the book. The house was quiet and the world was calm. The words were spoken as if there was no book, except that the reader leaned above the page, wanted to lean, wanted much most to be the scholar to whom his book is true, to whom the summer night is like a perfection of thought. The house was quiet because it had to be. The quiet was part of the meaning, part of the mind, the access of perfection to the page, and the world was calm. The truth in a calm world, in which there is no other meaning, itself is calm, itself is summer and night, itself is the reader leaning late and reading there. Thank you, Wallace Stevens. I actually had wanted to read this at another time, and here's a chance now tonight, I believe, is Naomi Shihab Nye's beautiful poem on the fullness and meaningfulness of kindness. It's called Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then, it is only kindness that makes sense anymore, only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread, only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. Thank you, Naomi Shihab Nye. Well, like the famous safecracker some of you may or may not know from the 1920s, Willie Sutton, very famous, and they took him a long time to catch up with him. But when he was finally apprehended and asked why he cracked safes for a living, he said, "I go where the money is, and I go there often." Well, I took a page from his book and substitute money for joy. I daily go where the joy is, and I go there often, daily, moment to moment as I can. Here's a poem of mine, Joyriding. Not the reckless kind or involving anything high speed or stolen. Rather, the ride your heart takes you on when you fly through the clouds or down the roads of new love or newly discovered passions, inspirations. Rides that, however long or short, are fully and wildly joyful. Take you to places of great aliveness, require no permits or permissions, no brakes or blinkers, only your willingness to go along, only your allowing of all the joy to rush through and around you. Be a free and full-on joyrider. The West African author and teacher from Burkina Faso, the Burkinabe author, Sabonfu Somé. By the way, Burkina Faso was once known as Upper Volta. I think when I was in diplomatic school at Georgetown, the Foreign Service School, I think that's what it was called then, but now Burkina Faso. He said the kind of passion, the kind of emotion and connection that Westerners look for from a romantic relationship, village people look for from spirit. So, joy, kindness, and here's compassion, Albert Einstein, and what we're all part of. He said a human being is part of a whole, called by us the, quote, universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Thank you, Albert Einstein. So, beyond E equals MC squared. There's such a wealth and wonder of meaning inside each of us. So much unexplored and unplumbed, unmined. As I spoke toward in the opening poem, here's a piece for us, a whole universe. So vast, marvelous, mysterious. The one we live in. The one we read about, talk, write, and muse about. But why bypass the one as profound, as boundless, that lives not out there, but in here, inside each of us? We, miraculous mirrors, microcosms, embodiers of that universe, its wisdom, energy, and wonder, awaiting our discovery, unveiling, expressing, in our own way, space, and time, the whole universe of you. Well, I find great meaning as I'm sure some of us, many of us, maybe more than, maybe all of us, in nature and the natural world. And Henry Beston is always a go-to for me. And he said, how wise were the ancients who never lost sight of the religious significance of the earth. They used the land to the full, draining, plowing, and manuring every inch, but their use was not an attack on its nature, nor was the ancient motherhood of earth ever forgotten in the breaking and preparing of the soil. They knew, as all honest people know in their bones, that in any true sense, there is no such thing as ownership of the earth, and that the shadow of any man is but for a time cast upon the grass of any field. What remains is the earth, the mother of life. Well, I raise a glass of winter water anyway to the Gaia, to the Mother Earth. I'm doing my best to revere her and be a good steward and the environment as I can, as I know we all can do, are doing and can do more of. So more on nature and our origins is the legendary science writer Lauren Eisley. Looking so across the centuries and the millennia toward the animal men of the past, one can see a faint light, like a patch of sunlight moving over the dark shadows on a forest floor. It shifts and widens, it winks out, it comes up again, but it persists. It is the human spirit, the human soul, however transient, however faulty men may claim it to be. In its coming, man had no part. It merely came, that curious light, and man, the animal, saw it to be something that no animal had been before. Cruel he might be, vengeful he might be, but there had entered into his nature a curious, wistful gentleness and courage. It seemed to have little to do with survival, for such men died over and over. They did not value life compared to what they saw in themselves, that strange inner light which has come from no man knows where, and which was not made by us. It has followed us all the way from the age of ice, from the dark borders of the ancient forest into which our footprints vanish. Man may grow until he towers to the skies, but without this light he is nothing, and his place is nothing. Even as we try to deny the light, we know that it has made us, and what we are without it remains meaningless. Thank you, Lauren Eisley. A little bit more on nature and the iconic, mythic, symbolic aspects of nature, not just the literal ones. As Olivia Lang wrote this marvelous book, and I actually have to get back to. I've read most of it, To the River. It's called A Journey Beneath the Surface. A river passing through a landscape catches the world and gives it back redoubled. A shifting, glinting world more mysterious than the one we customarily inhabit. Rivers run through our civilizations like strings through beads, and there's hardly an age I can think of that's not associated with its own great waterway. The lands of the Middle East have dried to tinder now, but once they were fertile, fed by the fruitful Euphrates and the Tigris, from which rose flowering Sumer and Babylonia. The riches of ancient Egypt stem from the Nile, which was believed to mark the causeway between life and death, and which was twinned in the heavens by the spill of stars we now call the Milky Way. The Indus Valley, the Yellow River, these are the places where civilizations began, fed by sweet waters that in their flooding enriched the land. The art of writing was independently born in these four regions, and I do not think it a coincidence that the advent of the written word was nourished by river water. There is a mystery about rivers that draws us to them, for they rise from hidden places and travel by routes that are not always tomorrow where they might be today. Unlike a lake or sea, a river has a destination, and there is something about the certainty with which it travels that makes it very soothing, particularly for those who've lost faith with where they're headed. It moves through time as well as space. Rivers have shaped our world. They carry with them, as Joseph Conrad had it, quote, the dreams of men, the seed of commonwealths, the germs of empires. Their presence has always lured people, and so they bear like litter the cast-off relics of the past. How about that? Well, 2 winter solstices ago, this ode on our human wayfaring, wayfinding came into me, as above and below. As the sun and gyring heavens, the ancient constellations above, balance with the turning earth, this terra firma we call home, below. Maybe in their solstice pausing and stilling, we can find our own place and peace of balance between them and within. Feel the deeper harmony of our being, our equally remarkable and faithful natures. Welcome this season of our life, the rhyme of our living, and a sense of our next unfoldings, whatever they may be, however clear or mysterious, as we follow through all familiar and unknown bareness, darkness, the light of our own bright gathered inner stars. Spread the warmth of the truest, tenderest parts of our hearts. Lean into the comforting grounding of our earthly bodies as we wayfare out, singly and together, toward more sun-long days, gentle springs, and footloose, time-soft summers. Well, I wanted to read us something about Sam Shepard, because I was thinking of things that can be greatly meaningful to all of us. We had a whole program on true friendship, and I was thinking of Sam Shepard and his relationship with his father-in-law, which was an incredible story of all the years they were together and were great friends and helped each other in many ways, and also evolved. In the book, it's called Two Prospectors, the letters of Sam Shepard and Johnny Dark, his father-in-law, and how friendship can help us reveal ourselves, our inner meaning, our outer purpose. So I think I'd like to keep us on in a different frame of time at the moment, so maybe I'll come to this another time. But it's a wonderful book. It's very illuminating about that and other things, and all I really wanted to add to that is I can relate to it because my dear father-in-love, and best friend for decades when I was married, Leonardo Tredenari. He's not with us anymore on Earth, but he was such a touchstone and understander and encourager. And if we have those in our lives, we must be sure to treasure them as much as we can while we have them. And here's a poem. When I think of how meaningful it is to have good friends of all kinds to raise your spirits if they're low, or raise them higher if they're high, but raise them even higher, is The Heart Lifter. This was from a behind the curtain show of Theater on Paper. This was the story poem for one of the characters that I had in the show that I put on in New York and New Jersey and D.C. and out west. The Heart Lifter, the one you want around when your skies are cloudy and gray, when your spirits have fallen to record lows, when you've forgotten your beauty, all the bounty alive inside you. And of course, we ought to speak of the meaningfulness of having love in your life, and of all different kinds, but whether it's a parent love or love for a child, love of a partner, and here's that. Having a true love to share life and life's adventures with. This was written in Greece when I did have that relationship, and it meant so much to me. It meant the world to me, and I was not with that person. They were across the other side of the world, but they were in me, and I felt them all the time, and I felt them this particular moment in this small island in Greece, in the Cyclades. It's called Lambo, which is I shine. I shine by the so-blue sea. I shine with mouthfuls of cold wine. I shine with salt-scented wind on my outstretched body. I shine when I close my eyes and feel your hand in mine. Feel all your love flowing inside. On a day like this, I can only shine. Well, contemplating the meaning of life led me to the one of those, quote, secrets, like the secret waters, right? And alchemy and things of that kind, and of that others have sought and written about and desired. And I had the rare fortune to taste, in a way, speaking of love, and part of what I believe it is. And I called this a revealing. It's called the Elixir of Life. I found can bring to light the secret of the Elixir, the elixir of life, the dancing water alchemist through time, from the far to near East, Egypt, India, and Europe were seeking. The deep love of nature, the deep love of life, the deep love of self, the deep love of another. I've tasted it truly before. We'll drink of it fully again when another rare soul blooms in the garden of my heart. I was contemplating for us the beautiful meanings of memory, the sweet flavors and colors we can preserve through memory, especially things like childhood, and what a treasure trove that can be, for us. And this was a poem of remembering. It's called Lillian and Mary. It's in my debut collection, The Speed of Sight, out in the world there, online and all that. Lillian and Mary. My grandmother's name was Lillian. And Mary in question is, you will find out, a 5-year-old hand holding a 65-year-old hand a lifetime ago, standing at the open mouth of the mammoth grand salon of the soon-to-sail ocean liner she was steaming away on in a cloud of confetti, maybe to England or France. The itinerary no longer remains or matters. Just that moment when I stood at the edge of another age, with 2 proud old ladies, my grandmother Lillian, with her calico cat-soft voice and mink stole, and the Queen Mary, with her stout red lipstick stacks, preparing to cross the Atlantic together, and a little camel-capped and coated boy floating there, with his mother somewhere behind the scene, for a bon voyage. I was going through poems I hadn't seen in a while, and ones that I felt fit our theme, and here's one I came across that we can all have these touchstones, that take us back, and whether it's a poem or a journal or a jotting or just recollecting from that treasure chest of resonant rememberings is part of a very meaningful life, I think. Definitely to things that mattered, touching back to things that resonate, good energy for us, that we can draw back up into us. There was a restaurant that I absolutely loved in its earlier days, and I don't think it's there anymore, and it was called the Union Square Cafe. And I had a favorite spot that I would sit at overlooking the restaurant on a tiny balcony, just one table there where I sat. It's called the Table at Union Square, where conversations were served and feelings unfolded like linen napkins onto our laps, where laughter and tears poured like wine and sparkling water. That table for 2 up the stairs on the small balcony overlooking bacchanalian revels across the grape-clustered wall, overhearing the happy din of diners below, all the while being looked at through lithe legs by the upside-down gaze of the ruffle-dressed woman acrobating inside her frame. The favorite table where friends or lovers and I sat, eyes embracing eyes, over supper and sometimes long lunches, always with ice-green bottles of acqua di Neppi and salty black raindrops of Niçoise olives. The table I want to remember forever down at Union Square. Beauty. Great meaning and beauty of all kinds, Our beauty, beauty of others, and we can behold nature and so on. The English nature writer from the mid-1800s, Richard Jefferies, insisted that, quote, the hours when the mind is absorbed by beauty are the only hours when we really live. There's a traditional Navajo, Native American prayer. As I walk with beauty, as I walk, the earth is walking with me. In beauty it walks before me. In beauty it walks behind me. In beauty it walks below me. In beauty it walks above me. Beauty is on every side. As I walk with beauty. It's a lovely meditation, by the way, to do wherever you're walking, especially in nature, and looking up to the sides, back to front, and saying those things. It's really very powerful, actually, in a quiet way. Rebecca Solnit, I'd mentioned her earlier, but she had a different book called Cinderella Liberator. It was a retelling, a reframing of the Cinderella story, and it's really about beauty and love and what we love. And she said in that book, but there isn't actually a most beautiful person in the world because there are so many kinds of beauty. Some people love roundness and softness, and other people love sharp edges and strong muscles. Some people like thick hair, like a lion's mane, and other people like thin hair that pours down like an inky waterfall. And some people love someone so much that they forget what they look like. Some people think the night sky full of stars at midnight is the most beautiful thing imaginable. Some think it's a forest and snow, and some, well, there are a lot of people with a lot of ideas about beauty and love. When you love someone a lot, they just look like love. I liked what Eduardo Galeano, the Uruguayan writer, had to say about, from Walking Words, Window on Art. I was a boy, practically a child, and I wanted to draw. By lying about my age, I snuck in with the students who were sketching a nude. In the classes, I kept wasting paper struggling to find lines and shapes. That naked woman who shifted her pose was a challenge for my clumsy hand and nothing more, something like a breathing vase. But one night, at the bus stop, I saw her dressed for the first time. When she stepped into the bus, her skirt slid up and revealed the threshold of her thigh. That was when my body burned. Ursula Le Guin on language said one of the functions of art is to give people the words to know their own experience. There are always areas of vast silence in any culture, and part of an artist's job is to go into those areas and come back from the silence with something to say. It's one reason why we read poetry, because poets can give us the words we need. When we read good poetry, we often say, yeah, that's it. That's how I feel. She also said that I think hard times are coming when we will be wanting the voices of writers who can see alternatives to how we live now and can see through our fear-stricken society and its obsessive technologies to other ways of being, and even imagine some real grounds for hope. We will need writers who can remember freedom, poets, visionaries, the realists of a larger reality. Well, to me and others, they're fundamental places, ones that transcend all time, endure, and I feel are worthy of our seeking and continuously experiencing and preserving. Truth, beauty, and goodness is the title of this. Things worth transcending to, places daily possible, through choices of thought, desire, feeling. Emerson was onto something. Outside the mind and the empirical, inside the intuition and the individual, the spiritual, the original, where the world and the soul freely commune, commingle, a getting down and opening up to essence, where truth lives with beauty, with goodness, with pure humanness. Okay. Coming down to the last stretch now. Seth Godin, I came back to his book. It's called What to Do When It's Your Turn. Excellent book. Very inspiring. It's been out there for a while. What to Do When It's Your Turn. The subtitle is, and it's always your turn. So here was one of the spreads. Do this. Avoid certainty. Pick yourself. Postpone gratification. Seek joy. Embrace generosity. Dance with fear. Be paranoid about mediocrity. See the world as it is. Be the boss of you. And he has the counterpoint. We don't have to read that because you can imagine what that would be. You know, on ourselves, in that great interior of each of us, there's something to be said for honoring that and our past and present paths and progressions. This is Memorial Day. Memorial Day. Mine and yours, when we might also honor the times we fell by some wayside in our life, heroically or simply humanly, or might commemorate the loss of some cherished part of ourself, maybe a sense of youth, innocence, once deep wonderments, might raise a flag or pin a flower to our heart to remind ourselves we're still alive, still making our way, still making our own worthy history. Here's a David Whyte poem that looks at the ways that I share of feeling a deeper meaning in my life, and especially the last stanzas here. Sweet darkness. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision is gone, no part of the world can find you. Time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your womb tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Thank you, David Whyte. You know, at times, I'm sure we must, all of us feel that search for real meaning can be opaque or challenging, or more meaning, or a conundrum requiring some legwork. And related to why we're here is this. What if it's a mystery play? Poem is what if it's a mystery play, this life, and we must, like Holmes in Hercule, carefully, cleverly follow its clues, however false at first, or faint, or far-fetched. Deduce the meaning hiding inside it all. Uncover the heart of our story, at least enough of the mystery to reveal the particular part we're each meant cast into the world to play. Which brought me to William Stafford's piece, The Way It Is, because following our truest, our strongest, our fullest life meanings specific to you and your nature is his urging, the way it is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. All right, so our last piece for now, for us, for you, on wholeness and wholefulness. In my book of Life and Living, they're essential places of being and seeking and value and immense meaning. So let's end this broadcast with this piece. A life of wholeness is a life of fullness, consciousness, completeness, where you embody all your essentials, mysteries, and remarkabilities. One of kindness, where you believe no one like you has ever before or ever will again lived. Presence, where you're entirely here, rooted in neither past nor future, just entirely now, each moment, constantly new. Centeredness, where you align, coalesce, to assure as a lodestone, north star, level point of balance, focus. Connectedness, where you live in touch with everything natural, everything physical, everything spiritual. Healthiness, where you invite, sustain a state of inner and outer clear-seeing, well-being. Expansiveness, where you ripple, bloom, open out like an ocean wave, like a summer garden, like the universe itself. Timelessness, where you know you're ephemeral, corporeal, fleeting dreamer and voyager, yet also in spirit, eternal. Peacefulness, where you inhabit places of harmony, serenity, clear and welcome possibility. Roundness, where you embrace and freely express your so large, solo-centric orbit, your perfect rightness, your great and irreplaceable allness. Thank you again for listening in, thinking, and feeling in, and to those who joyfully contribute to help support these programs and my poetic arts devoted to nourishing spirits, uplifting hearts, and sparking greater awareness and aliveness. If you find this or other programs and these arts of value, you can donate any amount by PayPal or Venmo, or directly through my site, or by regular mail to me at my P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island 02891. I also invite patrons to bring me their way this year for a month or longer as a private poet in residence on their property, to create new flights of work to share with and dedicate to them, to you if you become one of them. As always, send along your comments, questions, or suggestions. They're always welcome. Email Colin at thepoetorialist.com. Replays are online for you to revisit or share on. You can also easily subscribe to these broadcasts. Meanwhile, I hope you'll lean in next week or soon again. Until then, dear listeners, here's to finding, following, appreciating, and celebrating the real and resonant meanings in your life in all the forms they take. And as always, good spirits.